Perfect. Thank you so much, Aguela. And thanks to the whole Innovate US team for having us. We're really excited to be here and giving this presentation on how to plan better for success and use the tools of behavioral science to do better in implementation, which is always so difficult. Want to introduce quickly about the organization. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but just give a little bit of intro to where Gabby and I work. We are from BIT. We are a global research and innovation consultancy, and we really focus specifically on combining a deep understanding of human behavior with evidence-led problem solving. And so often the sort of shorthand for this is combining behavioral science with evaluation to help folks both in government, nonprofits, private sector, all over the world to design better policies, programs, and services. Before we sort of dive into the sort of heart of the presentation, I have a question for you. Gabby's going to launch a Zoom poll, but I want to hear to see if you have ever had a project where implementation went exactly as you planned. We're getting up there. A few more of you, like 72% participation. Let's see if we can get up to like 90. A few more. All right, Gabby, you want to call it? All right. So I want to talk to the four of you who answered yes and what you did right. Maybe you should be giving this presentation. I and Gabby are definitely not in that camp, even as behavioral scientists. I think overwhelming the experience is this sort of no. So I hope everybody feels like they are in good company, but we have some experts here that we need to tap into. So good for you. What the heart of this is sort of the reason why that sort of mismatch, right? That sort of planning to implementation and where things can go wrong points to why behavioral science, we think behavioral science can be such an advantage and such a help. And that's because implementation, I want to sort of hypothesize or say out to all of you, I want to declare that implementation is a behavioral challenge. So, you know, this means that we want people to act aligned with the behavior or the plan we've outlined. Most of the time, we are asking people to do something different than they've done before, right? When you're implementing something new, it means it's not business as usual. And that means that you're asking them to change their behavior. And what that means is that you basically have a behavioral science project nested within your original project. So surprise, there's layers. These nesting doll situations. You have another level of a sort of challenge to tackle beyond the sort of policy one or social impact one that you were trying to tackle in the first place. I hope that's not overwhelming because there are behavioral science tools that can help. In particular, I don't know if folks can put in the chat. I don't know if folks on the call are familiar with this COM-B model, but at the Behavioral Insights team, we use this a lot because it's just so helpful and it gives us sort of overarching framework to think about the different aspects in which you sort of can target different interventions or strategies, and what sort of all of the sort of complexity that sort of is underneath somebody taking an action. So what this model, we did not develop this model. There's a sort of a source down at the bottom. I highly recommend folks checking it out. But it really sort of unpacks behavior into these sort of three larger components. So capability, opportunity, and motivation. Capability, folks have to have the ability to do it. And that sort of means both physically, do they have the right tools? Do they have, if you're asking somebody to do something physical, like do they have the needed strength to be able to do it? Folks also need the psychological capacity and capability. So that's often when we think about implementation, having the right skills, having the right knowledge. The second aspect is opportunity. So people need the chance. They need to be given the choice, literally the opportunity to be able to action that behavior. And we all know that our sort of environment is hugely impactful in influencing what we choose to do. So this is sort of broken down in these two components: social opportunity. Am I asking people to do something that is socially acceptable? Does it feel like it's in the norm, or are you asking people to go against the grain? And then also physical opportunity. So do folks have the time to do it? Is it sort of an easy choice to make because it's sort of presented to them in their day-to-day environment? Or do they need to go someplace totally different to be able to access and action that behavior? And then the third component is motivation. I think this is the one that we often, think about most. I think the overarching thing about this model is to sort of suggest that motivation exists on a sort of equal playing field as opportunity and capability. But it is, so it's important. It's not the most important. But people do need both reflective motivation. So how does that action align with their self-image is sort of an aspect of this. And then also automatic motivation. So is it a change of habit? People get in routines and don't, something, a behavior becomes quite intuitive. They don't have to think about it very much versus, you're asking somebody to do something new, something that breaks their habits. So there's much more to each one of these, 6 sort of subtypes and the overarching capability, opportunity, motivation. But hopefully it gives you a good sort of opening set to sort of thinking about how to think about this when we approach an implementation project. So not only are there sort of these like basic pieces of how we think about motivating and encouraging and enabling people to do a behavior, but implementation also suffers from its own particular behavioral biases. And I've put 3 up on the slides here for us to sort of dive into today. So the first is optimism bias. And this is the tendency to be overly optimistic about our future outcomes. We tend to be thinking that the future will be much better than our past. We're much likely, we won't necessarily encounter all of the problems going forward that we have historically, applied to implementation. This is the sort of fallacy here around, we're definitely going to complete this project under budget and ahead of schedule, despite the fact that my organization has never completed a project under budget and ahead of schedule before in its history. The second one is illusion of control. So this is a tendency to believe that we are more in control of events than we actually are, right? That we feel that we are in control of our own destiny. So again, applied to an implementation project, this would look like our recruitment strategies will ensure we can reach our target of 2,000 participants. Well, there's a lot of other things that could be happening in the world that might make it very difficult to reach 2,000 participants that go beyond recruitment strategies, right? So if you're not thinking about all the other things that might be happening in your environment, in your context, in your community, it can really feel like, this is totally on us. We'll be able to do no matter what. An example, pandemics come along and all of a sudden your strategies have to change. The third bigger picture one, these sort of optimism bias and illusion and control are sort of variants of this larger problem, which is overconfidence. And this is a tendency to overestimate our abilities. And it's often called, we put here on the slide, the mother of all biases. It often comes up in lots of other variants in behavioral science. And it's sort of, again, like that ability to just be being overly certain, overly optimistic, overly positive, overly thinking that we are the that we control our destiny. So all of these are sort of, there's many more to get into, but these tend to be the three that we think about most when it coming to implementation. I'm going to pause here just before going into solutions. Do any of these sort of resonate more? Has it come up in your own implementation work, either optimism bias or overconfidence or illusion of control? I'm curious if anybody can put it in a sort of example from their real life. Folks being shy, that's okay. Yeah. I'll say personally for myself, I earned my PhD. Normally, I think that everybody sets out a guidance in my program that you get your PhD in 4 to 5 years. It definitely took me 9. So those are specific things, right? We're having sort of optimism bias and a little bit of overconfidence, can get in the way. Things take longer than you think. Yeah, exactly, Margarita, for sure. I think this is so interesting. The sort of over optimism bias, Jasmine, that's such a good one. People who are implementing projects, you are motivated. If you didn't think that this would work, you wouldn't be doing it, right? And so in order to be motivated to do something really hard, really difficult, really big, sometimes a little bit of that optimism bias, that's what's getting things out the door. So these are definitely things that there's a reason they exist in the human psychology. They're often very adaptive. They help us do new, interesting, bold things, but they can limit us when it comes to implementing projects and certainly don't help us make better plans. Okay, so reflecting on these things specifically, I hope that I've convinced you that there's a sort of behavioral science angle to thinking about implementation. Maybe potentially giving you a little bit of reason to caution about when we're sort of approaching an implementation project, what we need to think about. I don't want to lose, like, most of this presentation is now going to be on ideas for solutions. So we don't want to say there's a problem without giving you, hopefully, some strategies. So I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, and then we spend most of the presentation doing a little bit of a deep dive on this first one. I'm curious again in the chat, has anybody heard of pre-mortems? This comes often sort of inspired from medical industry, where people have to do a post-mortem on an operation. How did something go? You're often trying to do post. Oh, that's great, Kit. So the post-mortem is after the fact. You're sort of diagnosing and trying to unpack what went wrong. Pre-mortems is how to do that in the opposite direction. Do it before something has happened. And this really is directly targeted at trying to get at that overconfidence problem. So for folks who don't do pre-mortems, haven't done it before, basically you put yourself and your team in an imaginative state, and you say, implementation has greatly failed, things have gone off the rails, and everybody is tasked with sort of brainstorming as many reasons for the potential failure as possible. It's good to do these sort of, often there's plenty of templates out there for folks if you want to Google. It's really simple, low cost to do. Really, you just need a few people, a document. Hopefully, ideally, you can do it in person with some Post-it notes because it's more fun that way. And you can sort of let loose. You really want to use this in the step where you are making plans. So this is ideally before you've implemented, and you want to identify and then mitigate, sort of think through your strategies to mitigate those risks. thing from the field is that you want to try and make your descriptions as vivid as possible. So I really like our boss, Michael Hallsworth at BIT. He does these incredibly dramatic scenarios. And so you really, anybody, fiction writers, anybody like that, really pull them in to help you you brainstorm and make it really, really feel as real as possible. Okay, the second one, red teams. This one is like used less often often in sort of public contexts, but people who might be working in information security or IT may be more familiar with the sort of red team concept. And basically what you're doing here is you task somebody with acting as an adversary. So again, you can sort of imagine in a cybersecurity situation, a red team is somebody who is sort of tasked with sort of trying to break the defenses. The way that it's a little intense, often can be very cost prohibitive in certain scenarios. The way to make this sort of operational for everyday implementation context is you get somebody from outside the project team to, again, take a fresh pair of eyes and sort of poke holes in all of your sort of plans, your services, etc. It's particularly useful for testing products or services, right? Where you have something that somebody can like try and use and often try and break. I think the sort of implementation note here is that you really want red team members to be seen as group insiders. So even if they're not part of your project team, ideally they're a group of people that are trusted and respected. And that you often you take steps to prioritize psychological safety. Oh, I think we lost the slides, Gabby. I don't know. Perfect. The reason for this is red teams can feel, you want to make sure that the project team doesn't feel attacked and doesn't feel defensive. And so both the sort of making a sort of the person who's doing the red team, that they know that they're on their side in general, and that, you're basically sharing some of that feedback in a really psychologically safe environment can help mitigate this. Yeah, devil's advocate, exactly. I don't know if people do have to put proposals together. Often, like you can sort of think about red teams will go through and sort of mark up a proposal, taking the view of the funder or something like that to see where there's weaknesses. Okay, this third one, maybe again, sort of less familiar to some of you. This is something we do often at BIT. There's a bunch of different ways to operationalize this. But this is really around trying to mitigate group dynamics. So I think all of you have probably had the experience of being in a room of people. And there is definitely some folks who have more social clout, social power than others. So, sometimes that's because people are really loud, more outgoing. Some folks think slower, tend to want to write things down. But it's also, there's a group of people who are just sort of widely respected. And so people tend to listen a little bit more when they come up with ideas or suggestions. And what that can happen is it can really drive group dynamics before that you've gotten all of the information sort of out on the table. So think groups, and really this sort of portmanteau of sort of this like brainstorming, thinking through, and trying to do this in a group dynamic, is that you want to try and brainstorm anonymously. So this is really simple. If folks have access to Google Docs, this is how we do it at BIT. Everybody sort of joins a Google Doc in anonymous or sort of incognito mode. And so you can't see people's name in the document. And then you sort of just proceed in sort of writing and brainstorming as normal, but people can't know who is what. If anybody's familiar with Google, you show up as like a little animal, and you can't see who is writing what. The simplicity of this means that it can be done as part of any brainstorming process where you don't want social dynamics to get in the way of identifying risks or generating ideas. You can then go through as a group and sort of discuss normally to help prioritize or think through sort of next steps. So it's usually like we do it, you know, it might be 15 minutes to 20 minutes of a hour-long brainstorming session. And it's really easy to operationalize. Okay, this last one, again, these are not, there's many, many more different solutions to sort of help with decision-making and planning. But this last one is forecasting. Again, often sort of comes up economic context, thinking about budgets, etc. But you can do it again in sort of normal planning processes as well. So this would mean often going back and trying to look at past data. You would want to sort of understand, you know, what is our sort of typical overrun on budget? What is our typical delay for similar projects? And then you apply that to sort of your budgeting in the future, right? That you think about, okay, here's the budget that I've developed, but I know that we sort of typically overrun 7 to 12%. So let me increase the estimate that I'm making by that 7 to 10%. If you don't have prior data, you can also just think about making very specifically an optimistic and a pessimistic estimate. And we found that just actually having two estimates of the exercise of trying to do something at a high and a low end helps people calibrate a bit better in terms of what their target's going to be. So you would want to use this in any implementation setting where you're setting a target that can be observed, easily measured. So it can't be used for everything. Again, in sort of project implementation, that might be, you know, what your recruitment target is, or what your timeline is going to be, or how many of a certain output you're going to be able to produce, or yeah, you know, sort of what is the budget cost going to be. Used regularly, I think this is the best part, is that as an organization, the more that you incorporate forecasting into your practices, it can actually improve your accuracy and your calibration. And so if you're using it regularly in your planning processes, you'll start to find that your plans end up aligning a little bit more with reality. Okay, so those are 4 solutions. I think we've got this now. Just going to pause here and get people to reflect. People have already been doing this in the chat. But what has experience taught you about successful implementation? So yeah, Devin, you said, I think this is at the red teams, that using that as a sort of a devil's advocate. Yeah, finding the right partners for sure. Understanding organizational barriers, absolutely. That often has to come, thinking about that from a behavioral lens, that opportunity, what are the sort of organizational, what is that environment like that makes implementation easy or not easy? Hannah, prototyping, absolutely. I have to pilot things. Being clear, absolutely. Yeah, Karen, absolutely. It always takes longer than you might expect. I think that's for sure. Okay, we'll keep doing this, but I'm going to hand it over to Gabby to take us through an activity for the rest of our sort of next 2 minutes.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, so now that you have learned a little bit about this overconfidence bias that we all have in implementation, also some potential solutions, and this Combi model tool to identify barriers, we want to present you 3 cases. And we really want to get your thoughts on what barriers you find here and what strategies you think could be used to address them. So I'm going to share in the chat Google Doc that you can all use for reference. We basically have the cases there, and we have the Combi model tool in the second page, so you can use that for reference. Feel free to use it, download it. Yeah, I wanted to see if I could attach a Word version, but no, seems like I can't. So, okay, like I said, we're going to walk you through 3 different cases, and we want to have this interactive session again in the chat. So for this first case, this is talking about an implementation of a new digital records management system. Basically, a hospital in this case has decided that they want to transition from paper-based to digital records to basically improve efficiency, accessibility, and data security. So this new system aims to digitize all hospital records, including those related to patients, and to implement a centralized database for easy access and retrieval. So again, this hospital has been doing things in a certain way, right? Using paper in the past for their records, and now they want to transition to this new format. So we have listed some potential challenges that we can think of, these barriers of implementation, thinking a little bit about that combi model. So we have maybe employees are reluctant to change. They're familiar with the old system, and there's always that resistance to changing things. Maybe there's a fear of making mistakes. So now we want to ask you any other potential challenges that you can think of. Again, feel free to use that combi model sheet that we share with you to kind of like identify barriers, or yeah, you can start putting them in the chat. Anything else that you think can get in the way of implementing this system? Not understanding the new system or thinking it's too difficult. Definitely there's potentially a perceived effort that gets in the way. Patients' access to digital devices, patients' ability to manage login information. Exactly, the barriers may not be only for one group, may not be for the employees only. Barriers can come from different stakeholders, and patients can be one of them. Job security for certain roles. Exactly, that's a really good one. Fear of losing your job, losing certain positions, technology glitches, thinking it will take longer than writing on paper. That's so true. Implicit requirement like the ability to handle multi-language characters. Yes, fear of tech. That's a very real one. My dad, until recently, kept going to the bank every time he wanted to do a transfer until I taught him how to do that electronically. Incompatible systems. Okay, so we have lots of barriers we can think of. You probably didn't even need the combi model sheet. But now, again, the whole purpose of the pre-mortem is that we assume that this effort to transition to this new system failed. We think about what could have possibly gone wrong, and I think you pointed out very valid hypotheses for what could have gone wrong. And then the idea here is that now we should think about strategies that we can use to address these barriers. So I can start since we didn't include the strategies in the slides. We were talking a little bit about the fear of tech, making errors, making mistakes, or maybe having a training for employees on how to use this new system, and making sure that, you know, those gaps are being closed could be a good way of doing it. Of course, it would need to be in a very like safe environment so that there's no fear of making mistakes. But okay, yeah. Anything else that you can think of to mitigate some of the strategies that you shared with us? Okay. Rewards for using the new system. Okay. Co-design with employees and patients. Yeah, that's a really good one. Test the new system with real world data. Exactly, for sure. creating a backup for reassurance in case the online system goes down. That's really good. So you're thinking about all those different strategies that Emily shared with you. Another one that we can think of, someone was mentioning something about like the benefits, maybe not being clear about the benefits. So maybe making sure that everyone understands what the benefits are, the new efficiencies, time that is going to be saved. We could frame it that way. Now you can focus on these other activities instead of like in your job, as opposed to using all this time in this very manual and tedious record-taking activity. Yes, share success stories, work with change champions for sure. Okay, so really good strategies. Now let's go to the second case. In this case, we have a city, and basically they want to undertake a new waste management program to address concerns about waste generation and environmental sustainability. This program includes different components, including carbide recycling and composting, and it relies heavily, right, on resident uptake to succeed. Okay, so again, you should see this case also in your in the sheet, and I'm going to share some potential challenges that we can think of. Some residents may be skeptical about the effectiveness of the program. Maybe there's a lack of motivation to change their habits. Any other barriers that you can think of? Not easy to comply with for deployment, exactly. Maybe there are too many physical barriers, like Emily was saying. Maybe you need, specific tools, materials to do this. You don't have them. Maybe there's this, extra effort perception that doesn't seem like it's worth it. Not enough staff. Okay. Let's try to think a little bit more about those behavior barriers, like those barriers that can get in the way. They're behavioral, so that persistence. Community members may need more education on what is recyclable and what is not, exactly. So there could be some capability barriers. People don't really understand how this program works, how they do that, how to recycle. Lack of understanding about how to do it exactly, forgetting to put it on the curbside. That's a very legit reason not to do it. Financial barriers too. I'm trying to focus a little bit more on the behavioral ones, but yes, time intensive. It's just maybe not a pleasant activity. No pattern for the behavior. Residents don't have access to kind of receptacles. Exactly, right. So we can think about, again, a lot of behaviors around lack of awareness, the inconvenience of doing this task, also skepticism, lack of understanding, etc. Having to buy compostable bags, exactly. So it's not just one behavior, right? In order to do this, there are a set of behaviors. You need to remember to do this. You need to know how to do this. You need to prepare for it, plan for it. So again, maybe there are so many steps and it just seemed like it's exhausting or very taxing for residents. Okay, so what strategies could the city use then to overcome, maybe not all, but some of these barriers? Again, let's try to focus on those behavioral barriers. Yeah, I agree, Emily. That is a real motivation barrier. Neighborhood peer pressure. Utilities try this with energy use. That is great. Actually, at BIT, we love using social norms to incentivize behavior change. So if you know your neighbors are doing it and you're the only one not doing it, then definitely you're going to feel pushed to do this. Educational programs in places like schools. If my kids tell me to do it and help, we're more likely to try and do it. That's excellent. You're also going to learn how to do this. You're going to know that, more people in their community are involved. Rewards for top recyclers in the town. Yes, incentives are always useful in creating behavior change. So for sure, celebrity ads to create role models. Yeah, that's a good one, especially for younger people. Maybe we can have some TikTokers talking about the benefits of the program, campaigns to inform people on dates, what can be recycled and composed, and the dates for each neighborhood, maybe billboards, leaflets, etc. Right? Yeah, that's a really good one. So that way, you reduce the burden of having to remember this. You can inform people over and over and over again so that it becomes almost like, second memory to them. Reaching out to HOA and community associations to get buy-in from stakeholders, community figures, media showing people how to do this without it being gross, smelly, or challenging, etc. Right? We can have people influencing this behavior, maybe kind of like removing those perceptions around how gross it is. Create a town celebration to be incentive to an existing community event. Yeah, we can do something fun to incentivize the behavior. Free compost bags at libraries of community centers. That's a really good one. So we remove that physical barrier. Free compostable bags. Okay, a lot of solutions. Really good. Yes, composting kits. Yeah, that's really good. Okay. So again, as you can see, we have, different stakeholders here. This program in particular relies heavily on residents actually doing it. But if we don't think in advance about these barriers, then our program may not be successful. So we start to think how we try to put ourselves in the shoes of the people whose behavior we want to change. We start to think about this program basically not being successful, not going as it was supposed to, and we start to think about those scenarios or things that could have happened. So really good. Now we're going to our third and last case. This is an implementation of a district-wide education initiative. So for this project, a school district is launching an education initiative to improve student learning outcomes. They want to integrate technologies such as artificial intelligence platforms, smart tablets, and adaptive assessment tools to boost learning among students. Again, these technologies are supposedly aimed to help educators personalize instruction and support them. They can track student progress in real time and identify areas for targeted support. Now, as a teacher who's been doing things in a certain way, maybe we can think about some potential challenges. So the ones that we have here to the right in our slide, teachers have varying levels of experience with these tools. Maybe we have some teachers who know how to use technology. Some other teachers may not even know what AI is. I mean, hopefully they do, but maybe they don't. There may be concerns around the increased workload and reliance on technology. We have all this new data that is being collected. What does that mean, etc.? So it could be a little bit perceived as very overwhelming. So any other barriers that you can think of? Again, you can take some time. Okay, I can open the link right now because I'm sharing the slides, but I'm definitely gonna check that one out. Okay, students may need help troubleshooting problems. Teachers aren't trained in tech support. Yeah, that's really good. So as these tools are being deployed, some issues may come up and teachers may not be equipped to solve those issues. So there may be some resistance. Maybe they don't want to be in that position of not knowing how to address those issues. Parents may be freaked out. The tech is teaching their kids, not the teachers. Yeah, so we can bring in, other stakeholders. Maybe the barriers are not coming only from teachers, but parents. It's a new tool, it's a new thing, a lot of narratives around it. So they may just reject that idea. Poor technology, again, especially programming, exactly. So it takes time, right, to get used to a new tool. People may not know how to use it. Too many new initiatives, teachers don't know what to focus on. That's a really good one. It's, they're being overloaded with information, with all these changes on top of all the activities that they have to do. This can create definitely so many capability barriers where they're just overwhelmed and not really able to implement this and integrate this technology. Concerns around data privacy. So there may be, again, certain perceptions around the use of AI, and those may also get in the way. Students may feel less motivated if they feel the tech can just do the work. Yeah, that's true. So there may be some resistance there. Skepticism, yes, around the AI tools. Maybe they just don't believe that they are replaceable and that their ways of teaching kids are something popped up. Yeah, maybe they don't think that maybe they think that their ways of teaching kids are way better at achieving these outcomes than this new AI technology. Students may misuse the technology, worry about data privacy. Okay. So now that we have mapped these challenges, what strategies do you think the district could use to overcome them? Because we know that resistance is gonna be an issue. So what do you think? Test the drive system first before unleashing them in the classroom. Yeah, that's a really good one. You can make demonstrations. You can show how it works, what are the potential glitches or issues that may come with the tool. Incentive pay via grants and time off to compensate teachers, professional development. Yeah, that's a really good one, just to remove those physical and capability barriers. Let me see, framing the benefits to the teachers using case studies from other schools show the time they will save. Exactly, we can tap again into those social norms, telling them that other schools, other teachers are doing this, also showing them the benefits, demonstrating what the gains are, so that some of these concerns are removed. Don't launch the initiative. Allow input from the users. Yeah, that's a really good one. Always having these co-creation sessions and making sure that all these concerns are being addressed a priori is definitely a really good strategy. Have clear policies drafted and mechanisms to enforce it, creating model lessons. Exactly. You can definitely have some training programs to close those gaps and basically try to balance that lack of understanding, founding programs to reward students, provide training for teachers to come up to speed with the new system. Okay, yeah, so these are all really fantastic solutions. Thank you so much for being so active in the chat. Yes, collaborate with teacher unions. That's a really good one as well. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts with us in the chat. Basically, what we want to get here with these 3 cases is that if we may get too excited, as you were saying, with this new project, with this new tool. At the end of the day, you want to sell this project, you want people to accept it, and maybe you may miss some of the behavioral barriers that can come up during the implementation. So the pre-mortem, thinking in advance about, what could have gone wrong, or what went wrong with implementation, can definitely help address all those concerns and all those barriers that some stakeholders may have. Okay, so now with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Emily.
I'm going to be brief here so we can get into Q&A. But just to wrap up sort of the main points from today, we want to argue that behavioral challenges are core to implementation. There's lots of other things that go in, but having a behavioral lens to sort of thinking through your implementation plans can help you think through additional challenges you might not have thought about. So for example, implementation, often success depends on addressing things like resistance to change, overconfidence, any skill gaps. We hope that, again, the COM-B model is a flexible way to apply a behavioral lens to really anything, any sort of program, policy, challenge, anything in your design. But it can be particularly useful in offering a framework to identify gaps in capability, opportunity, and motivation in thinking through your implementation plans. And then we went over 4 different strategies, different tools to help implement this and tackle overconfidence, pre-mortems, red teams, think groups, and forecasting. We think these are practical, low cost. Often you can implement them just with a doc and some helpful minds, and they can help you mitigate biases by identifying risks early and helping you improve planning accuracy. So that is it for the content for the webinar. And we're really excited to hear from you about the questions or suggestions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Emily and Gabby, for this so helpful presentation. And please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or also you can raise hands and unmute and ask the question directly. So we are here to answer. We have exactly 9 minutes and the session, so we are doing perfectly well. Okay, so we have a thank you so much. And any questions? I mean, it has been a very active. Okay, yes. This first question is technical. Will you share your slides?
Yes, absolutely. We'll share them with we'll let the team distribute them after the session.
And for the information of all the participants, we also send tomorrow, we send a summary of the session with the key talking points, like a learning guide and the link to the recording. Okay, and we will include the presentation too. There's Amy Addison. You can unmute and please ask directly.
Thank you so much, and thanks for all the wonderful information. My question is about behavioral science and, the implementation approach and how y'all think it relates to the change management cycle, and kind of where, if you do think so, where you might plug some of these in